Hello everybody and welcome back to Oxygen Included. Today we're going to be looking at duplicant selection. What are the interests, the traits, the attributes, the stress reactions, all the stuff that you want to see in your starting group of duplicants, what things to avoid, what things to look for. And this is going to be a guide that I think is primarily helpful for newer players who don't know what any of this stuff means, but also is probably going to have some interesting information for returning players because they have changed a lot of stuff. I mean, if this screen looks different to you, it's different because they've changed a lot of things about the way the game works and about the way that rolling your initial duplicants works. So if you're a returning player, this guide might also be of some use to you. So let's start off with just sort of a list of the things that are associated with duplicants. Each duplicant is going to have an appearance, a name, these things are linked, a stress reaction, which is also tied to the name and appearance. So every Gossman is going to look like this and have vomiter as their stress reaction. And then randomized, they're going to have a set of interests, which are tied to what attribute bonuses they get, and then a positive and a negative trait. When you get duplicants from the printing pod, they might have multiple positive traits, multiple negative traits, different randomized things. But for your starting duplicants, this is all going to be kind of the same. And also if you're printing pod duplicants, these things are still going to be linked, right? That's kind of just because they only have vomiting animations for Gossman. They don't have crying animations or destructive animations or binge eating animations. So they've kind of, controlled things in that way that they have to do a little bit less work. But that's just something to keep in mind. There are 35 individual duplicants in all, so 35 individually named duplicants. Through re-rolling, you can get 33 of them potentially. There are 2 of them you can't get. Those are Liam and Meep. Those can only be printed from the printing pod, right? If we do this however many times we want, we're just never going to get a Liam or a Meep. Yeah, we can get Stinky multiple times, but we're never going to get Liam or Meep. We're never going to get that blue-haired research guy or the really kind of dumb-looking Meep. So 35 individual duplicants, 33 of them you can roll here. Don't try and get Meep or Liam because it just won't work. I guess a little bit of a disclaimer before I continue on any further. This video is being made 2 days before the game's release, so hopefully a lot of this stuff stays the same. I will update the description below with anything that's changed, and if things have changed too much, then I'll just redo the video. But hopefully this will be up to date. I don't think they're going to change much more about this. I think a lot of the sort of balance changes that they plan on making are going to be different aspects of the game. But keep that in mind. Check the description to see if anything has changed. And if things have really changed, then I'm going to put like in brackets deprecated or something next to this title. And there's going to be an updated video somewhere on my YouTube channel. So keep that in mind. Make sure you're looking at the most updated version of all the information. And with that said, let's continue on. So in addition to their names, their appearances, their stress reactions, they're going to have these randomized interests, traits, and attributes, right? And we kind of want to cover just in order, what are these things good for? What are they useful for? And what can you do to kind of impact them? So first off, if you're a returning player, you'll note that you can change what sort of guy you're getting when you re-roll over here. You can go with random, in which case it'll just give you anything. Or you can say, look, I want a builder. And this guy is going to have building as one of their interests. Right here we have Mima. She likes building and also tidying. If they have 2 interests, they will get +3 in the relevant attribute connected to them, right? If they have 3 interests, they'll get +1 in each of those attributes. And if we reroll again, we get Rowan. He only has 1 interest, that's building, and he gets a +7 in this area. The way the interests work is that in the skill progression, what was formerly the job system and is now basically skills, as your duplicants learn new skills, their morale requirements go up. And these morale requirements are cumulative. So if you learn a building skill, and then you learn a mining skill, and then you learn something else, each of those things is going to add to your morale requirements. These interests, what they do is if they learn a skill in an area that they are interested in, if they learn Construction 1, for example, Rowan is going to get +1 morale from that, which will help meet that new higher morale requirement. Sometimes it'll entirely meet the morale requirement. If Rowan is interested in building and he gets Construction 1, his morale requirement will go up by 1, but also his morale will go up by 1 because he enjoys building. If he gets Construction 2, that morale requirement is going to increase by 2, but he's still only going to get +1 from picking up that skill, right? That skill has a +2 bonus to his morale requirement, but it's only going to give him +1 morale. So it's kind of a bonus that decays a little bit as you go into the late game, but is still very important because it's really a good way of managing a lot of your morale requirements for your duplicants. What's more important to us usually than the interests, unless we're looking to draft basically a specific guy like an astronaut who's going to have to get a specific combination of a lot of different skill types together in order to become an astronaut, or they're going to need supplying, researching, and suit wearing, right? That's going to be the three interests we're looking for an astronaut. If we're not going for an astronaut, what we probably care more about is the attribute bonuses. There are, for each one of these interests, a corresponding attribute bonus, and that's going to determine the bonuses that a duplicant gets when performing a certain operation. So in this case, Rowan is interested in building, and he gets a +7 to construction. Each point in construction is going to increase the speed at which he builds a building by 25%. And I'm just going to start discussing each of these attribute bonuses and whether or not they're good or bad, the importance of them, how I would rank them in sort of the general scale of things. And let's just start with construction since we have that up right here. Construction is something that you're going to be doing a fair amount of in the game, but what's interesting is that a lot of the construction task is not in actually building the building. A lot of the construction task is in supplying the resources to the building or digging your way out to wherever you're going to build this building. So a lot of time is spent running around, a lot of time is spent picking up resources and supplying them, a lot of time is spent digging out this area that you're going to eventually build things in. So construction is pretty far down there in terms of what I want to be looking for as an attribute bonus, because even for a guy who's dedicated to building, probably what he cares about most is how much in building materials can I carry to my job site, and how fastly can I run there. So he's going to care about strength, and he's going to care about athletics a lot more than he's going to care about construction. It doesn't hurt to have a construction guy at the beginning when your base is really small and everything's kind of clustered together. A guy who can build fast is actually kind of useful because he can, he doesn't have that much of a space to move around in and deliver stuff to, right? Those are a little bit less important the closer your base is together. But the further things out are, the more difficult this becomes, and kind of the more specialized a lot of this stuff becomes in sort of a weird way, because if I'm out building a ladder on some far end of the colony, I'd like to be able to run out there, supply the materials, and then start building it. To kind of divide up the task into, there's a guy who runs out and supplies things and a guy who builds things, is kind of inefficient, because that means that one guy's going to have to run out there, supply the stuff, and then he's just going to leave without building the thing, and then the builder's going to have to come out there and build it. So it's a very difficult thing to divvy up tasks into, right? This is the guy who's only going to do the building, this is the guy who's only going to do the supplying. It's kind of beneficial to have them do both. And so if I'm interested in getting a builder, I'm actually probably interested in getting a guy who has faster run speed and larger carrying capacity. So I don't really find construction to be a very useful attribute very much, and I'll usually avoid it as something that I would try and specialize in. Also, building as an interest isn't particularly relevant. There are only 3 building skills, and again, because each of these skills is mainly going to upgrade their construction, and there's not really much else that's going to be given a bonus from that, this is pretty useless. Building is going to be one of the much lower things that I care about. Next up, we have a cooker. Cookers are pretty useless. The cuisine skill only determines how quickly a duplicant prepares food. So cuisine +3 gives them a +15% cooking speed. This is basically useless. Number one, 5% cooking speed per point is just so little, given that they're probably not going to spend a ton of their time cooking. I mean, maybe I might have, if I have a large base really late in the game, one guy dedicated to like all the cooking, but even that is not going to be that important. Like, duplicants only eat so much food. You only need to prepare so much of it per cycle, per day, per whatever. Having this bonus is just not that relevant. If it affected the quality of the food, or if it was necessary to have a really high skill in order to reach the high qualities of food, this would be more relevant. But man, 5% for something so small, right? Like, this guy would have to be completely specialized in cuisine. I'm certainly not going to take this in my starting dupes, and I'm probably not even going to look for it very hard when selecting further dupes, right? Because I'm not going to be doing a lot of cooking early on, and I don't care about this. So cooking, pretty bad. Decorator. This used to have an impact on the quality of the decorations, and now I think it's much less of an impact. I don't know kind of how they've changed that, but this is also, along with cooking, something that I'm not that interested in upgrading. 10% increase in decorating speed is not useful really much at all. creating artwork, you care more about the quality than you do the speed at which you're creating the artwork. And that's just not, like, again, with cooking, it's not a big deal, right? I might have one artist in my entire colony if it's a large colony, and otherwise I might just completely get rid of it. The main thing you're probably getting out of this system with the decorating bonus is that you're getting this +1 to morale when you learning decorating skills. So when you have that dedicated artist, you don't actually need to supply them with really high morale in order for them to do that, right? Like, this is almost like a side thing that they do. They might primarily be a digger or a supplier or something like that, and they just have this sort of creativity as a side thing. That way they don't have to increase their morale requirements by very much in order to meet those, the ability to provide some sculptures and stuff on the side. Decorating, really far down there in terms of what I'm looking for. Digging, though, digging is pretty huge. I mean, we talked about like a 10% or 5% increase at the speed at which a duplicant performs something. This is a 25% increase in digging speed per point of excavation. I mean, I don't understand, because digging has done a lot more than cooking or art, and it gets a plus 25%. That's absolutely gigantic. The plus 5% attack damage is not super relevant. Really, the only creatures you're ever going to have a tough time fighting are going to be, I guess, smooth hatches, but mainly poke shells. And there are other ways of killing poke shells than just straight up combat. So the extra combat stats, not super important. But the digging speed is absolutely huge, especially for an early game duplicant, when a lot of the tasks that you have to do are just digging out a lot of the base, right? If I reroll till I get a +7 excavation, this person, Frankie, digs almost 3 times as fast as a normal duplicant. In fact, because they have another +3 to their excavation, this person is going to dig about 4.5 times as fast as a normal duplicant. That's gigantic. That's huge, right? Or did I get that wrong? It's 3.5? 3.5, right? 3.5 times the speed is huge. Absolutely gigantic. I like having a dedicated digger at the start of the game. A dedicated miner, basically, to tackle all those tasks can be really big. I look for it less in the late game, because in the late game, I, probably already have a miner left over from when I started in the early game, but also, things shift from doing a little bit less digging out of the map and more to, building stuff out and doing other things. And so this becomes a little bit less important, right? But excavation's a big one, especially for your early game duplicants. A lot of them are just going to spend a lot of time digging. Going on to doctoring. Doctoring is really useless. You don't even really need doctors for a lot of applications. Again, like an artist, you maybe need 1 in your base, and all of these things are just so irrelevant. Medicine fabrication speed is probably the big one, right? Especially if you have maybe like a base full of allergic duplicants and you're getting stress reactions from that. Being able to craft this stuff pretty quickly might be important. You're at least getting 10% fabrication speed per point. It's not like 5%, right? It's not something just laughably low, but it's still pretty bad. And treatment speed is pretty bad. Your duplicants probably aren't getting hurt or sick all that often, and the treatment task doesn't take that long, so you're not really saving much time with this. Doctoring is just really low down there, at least in the way that the germ system currently works, and the way that medicine currently works. This is one of the most useful skills in the game, I think. I'm really just not interested in training up doctors, and certainly in the early game, I don't really have any intentions of having my duplicants get hurt or sick, so this is just really useless for early game duplicants. Farming is really interesting, and this is going to be kind of a big variable, because it isn't just that it increases harvesting speed, which is pretty minor, all said, or tending speed, right, which is going to be pretty similar, but it changes the seed chance. It changes the frequency at which you will get bonus seeds from harvesting a plant. The base chance of getting a bonus seed is 10%, right? This is going to give an extra 23%. So it says plus 23% seed chance. It's really a 23-point increase, right? Instead of getting a 10% chance of getting a seed, this guy's going to have a 33% chance of getting a seed, which is pretty big. So for a lot of operations, a lot of early game starts, you're going to want to expand your farming really quickly, especially if you plan on taking on a lot of duplicants really quickly, right? You want to have enough food to support them, which means you need to have enough seeds, which means you need to get enough seeds from farming. Depending upon the rate at which you plan on accepting new duplicants, this could be really important or really unimportant, right? I think a lot of it comes down to that increased seed chance. If that's really valuable to you, if you need to expand the size of your farms really early on, really fast, you don't have time to wait, bringing a farmer along is going to be really important. If not, the rest of these bonuses are just kind of minor, right? Harvesting speed, 5% per point in agriculture, not that great. Roughly 2.5% per point in agriculture for tending speed. Again, it comes down to seed chance. If you care about seed chance, and I think a lot of starts you will, then this is important. It's something you should include in your starting duplicants, right? A dedicated farmer or something. If you don't care about seed chance, it's a lot less relevant and something that you can probably just pick up later, right? But it is interesting, though, because for a large enough base, you will have a lot of ranching or farming tasks, I should say. So this can be kind of important in that end. Something to keep in mind, again, the seed chance is the really big one here. Going to operator. Operating is really weird. So there are a lot of machines that don't care about your operation speed because they are gated by other factors. A big one, for example, is the metal refinery. The metal refinery, it only accepts coolant in at a fixed rate. And so if you have 0 machinery skills, 0 operating skills, you still operate a metal refinery at its peak capacity, right? The upside of having machinery is that you process the job faster, and then the machine is off more or less while it waits for more coolant to flow in. So you consume less power in that regard. But that's going to be the story for a lot of the machines in the game. You don't actually care about operation speed, except unless you're like really concerned about the power use of the machine. And in a lot of circumstances, that just doesn't matter, right? Because you're probably going to be awash in power. You're going to have some coal generator hooked up to a smart battery somewhere, and you're just going to get as much power as you want out of a bunch of setups like that. And saving on power isn't going to be that important. There are a few exceptions where this really will just increase the speed at which you get stuff, right? But a lot of the time, that isn't the limiting factor, right? And so operating can be really, really bad. I don't know. It depends on how you set things up, but I think a lot of the time, this is just not. This is going to be a useless stat, right? And again, 10% per point is like not the same as 25% per point, which is for digging, and digging is one of the most important things. So I rank this one pretty low as well. Going to ranching. Ranching is pretty interesting now. It actually has an effect. Before, your ranching skill did absolutely nothing, and now it increases the duration of grooming by 10%. This is, I've kind of been talking badly about a lot of these things which are just 10%, but 10% for groom effect duration is pretty good, right? Like, this decreases the number of times you'll need to go out to that place and do the job. A lot of these, improvements don't really affect how often you need to go and supply a building, right? You'll still need to have guys moving around a lot of material to supply a building. So if you're operating that building faster, you're also just kind of creating more work for a lot of your other duplicants, right? If you're cooking faster, right? Maybe you don't care because guess what? Like you're only cooking so much food per go. Here though, because you're usually traveling out to a ranch to go and do the ranching, having just the effect last longer means you're taking fewer trips overall. You're cutting down on the time that you're spending going to this location, as well as cutting down right on effectively how much time you're spending at the job. So fewer trips to accomplish the same results is great. So this still isn't going to be very high up there, especially if you're making a base where you're not going to do any ranching, then this becomes really irrelevant, right? But if you are planning on doing ranching, I think this is actually like decent, right? I don't think it's fantastic, but I would count this as a decent buff that I would actually consider over things like building and other things like that, right? Art and cooking and doctoring, all these are really low. This one's at least like not great, but not terrible. That's the most I can say about it. Researcher. This is still one of the broken stats. This one is absolutely fantastic. And again, it's crazy because look, 1 point of science gets you an extra 40% research speed. I mean, we've talked about a lot of these where, look, the guy gets a 10% bonus per point. Whoop-de-doo. This is 40% bonus per point. It's in something that you're definitely going to do, which is research. And in fact, research is going to be gating a lot of the stuff that you can do early in the game. Frankly, if you want to play this game on kind of easy mode, what you do is you find a guy who has +7 in science, right? He's got only an interest in researching. And look, wow, I already did it. And quick learner. This guy has +10 to science. And they're just going to research at 400% the research speed. This guy is going to blaze through research way faster, right? Like this is plus 400% is 5 times the research speed. And the time it takes you to normally complete one bit of research, this guy's can complete 5. Absolutely huge. And here's the really kind of insidious thing about why this skill is so good. It's not just that it gives you plus 40% in something, which is insane, right? Like even better than the digging, which was 25%, and that I was very impressed by. It's that it also gives you bonuses to skill leveling and attribute gains. It doesn't even list that there, but it gives you bonuses to attribute gains proportional to that of the skill leveling. So each point is giving us plus 10% in skill leveling, which is basically the rate at which a duplicant gains experience and then can learn a new skill, right? They can become a researcher, they can become a miner, they can become, right, they gain some new ability, right? You level them up, they go to the printing pod and they have their brains scanned and they gain another thing. That skill leveling, right, is increased by 10% per point of science. So this guy is going to gain XP twice as fast as everyone else. And also, right, he's going to gain more attribute points. Duplicants passively gain attribute points over time. They gain extra points in cooking and excavation and creativity and medicine and in science and strength. All these things, right? All these attributes we've been talking about. These slowly increase over time for duplicants. Frankie here is going to gain these passive attribute bonuses twice as fast as anyone else. So it's not just that he's going to have faster XP gain, which allows him to learn more skills, which also boosts his attributes. He's also going to be passively gaining those attributes faster. Science, which used to be called learning, is still just an absolutely crazy skill. It's a super skill. It's one of the best in the game. Yeah. If you really want to play the game on easy mode, again, start with at least one guy with exactly this, right? Maybe not Anemic. I'll get to that in a bit, why this one's pretty bad. But +7 science with quick learner. This guy will absolutely destroy the research tech tree and become a super dupe by just buffing everything else pretty quickly, right? He's going to just outpace all the other duplicants in terms of becoming like a super dude really quickly. So researching, super important, super critical. This is huge. The mega trait, right? Suit wearer. Suit wearing is you're only going to take one skill in suit wearing, which is going to be exosuit training. For most duplicants, you will use it more if you are training a duplicant up to be an astronaut. So this interest is like one of the least useful ones in most circumstances, because most duplicants are only going to take 1 point in it, whereas, you know, a duplicant that is doing like researching is going to take 3 points in researching. So they're going to get +3 morale effectively over the course of their lifetime from that research interest. So suit wearing is a really weak interest, but it's tied to one of the best attributes in the game, which is athletics. A lot of your duplicants are going to spend a lot of time running around your base, either gathering materials for things or delivering materials to things or just going to a job site or whatever. Very frequently, even for like top tier players, and there isn't really like a ranking system. This is a single player game, right? Like who's the best Minecraft player in the world? Like who knows, right? Like, but for players who are more experienced, I should say, not top tier players, like there's some ranking of players. For veteran players, right? Even veteran players will often find that they get the long commute message, right? Your duplicants are spending a lot of time running around and not doing stuff, just running between jobs sites. That's just going to be a part of the game. Running around is a lot of what your little ant colony does, and run speed as a result is absolutely huge. Like all those bonuses to everything else that were 10%, this one's just better, right? Duplicants are going to spend probably half their day running around. Athletics is absolutely huge in that regard. Run speed is huge. In fact, one of the really crazy things is, I should have kept that anemic guy for a second there. Losing run speed is gigantically bad. Like it's one of the major things that hurts you when it comes to a disease. So or like when you're using an exosuit without exosuit training, it's the minus penalty that you get to athletics that really punishes you, and going below 0 is what really punishes you for a lot of this stuff. For strength, for athletics, for all this stuff, it's that, going below 0 where you get that really slow duplicant that really starts to take a toll on things. Even if you don't have your duplicant running around a ton, just having the athletics trait, or the athletics bonuses, the attributes, I need to keep my terms correct here, traits are a different thing. Having this attribute bonus pretty much inoculates them against a lot of other things, right? You can have your duplicant contract some of the worst diseases in the game and wake up with sore backs and do all this stuff and have hypothermia and all these things, and it still won't slow them down that much because they have all these bonuses. So this is how you keep your dupes really healthy, is just start them off being these crazy athletes, and they won't run into that many problems. So this is kind of like having a lot of positive traits rolled into one. This is practically like having germ resistance and everything like that, because this is just so good. So keep that in mind. I think this is not quite a super stat like learning or science as it's called, but it's one of the best traits that you can have in the game. Not traits, again, attributes, sorry. Supplying. Strength is another one. Strength is absolutely fantastic. This is a plus 40 kilogram carrying capacity. Keep in mind the duplicants start off with a 200 kilogram carrying capacity, so this is a significant increase, right? Obviously, just like with athletics, going into negative in strength is really bad. It's not good because you lose 40 kilograms of carrying capacity per point of strength that you're in the negative. So, right, if you're -3 strength, that's pretty bad, right? You only carry 80 kilograms now. That's not a lot. Most buildings are going to require you to have 100 kilograms of something on you. If you get down to 80, you have to take double trips for everything, no matter how small the thing that you're supplying usually. Conversely, increases in strength, really huge. They basically cut down on the number of trips you have to make for a lot of things. There are really easy ways to increase your carrying capacity that you can unlock fairly early on. Taking the gopher skills and things of that sort will basically double your carrying capacity and then double that again. So there's ways to get your guys to carry a lot of stuff that can overcome this pretty quickly. But I really like strength as a trait, even though there are these easy ways to boost it, and easy ways to boost in particular the carrying capacity. Tidying speed, not that important. I could kind of live or not live with that. Not that big of a deal. But the increase in carrying capacity is huge. I think strength is one of the best stats. Not better than learning, probably not even better than athletics, but it's up there with athletics. Arguably, it's better than athletics. And then finally, we have Tidier, which basically does the same thing. There's differences in the interests, right? Some skills are going to be tidying skills, other ones are going to be what do they call them? Supplier skills, right? So gophers versus like the janitor guys. Not a big deal in terms of morale difference. You're probably going to care more about supplier because everybody wants to get basically gopher. Gopher's like a really, really good skill to learn. So I would probably go with a supplier over a tidier if I had the choice. But it's not that big of a deal. In fact, if you really wanted to, if you just want the strength stat, try and find a guy who has both supplier and tidier. That way you can double dip on those morale bonuses, but still basically get the same amount of strength, right? He'll have +6 strength as opposed to +7 strength. Not that big of a deal. Is that possible? That would be interesting. Does supplying and tidying, can you even get both of them? Yeah, you can. Okay. Yeah, so you get the bonuses of strength, but you get the bigger morale bonuses. So I'd double dip on this if I could. And yeah, that basically covers all of these attributes that you can get. And the interests are pretty self-explanatory. Just look at your job sort of your job tree, right, and see what skills are relevant. I wouldn't really concern yourself too much with this because I think it's really easy to meet a lot of the morale requirements in the game. It becomes more relevant if you're playing on a harder difficulty, being able to meet these morale requirements, but I think for people playing on the base difficulty, this isn't going to be a problem. And even if you're playing on like the harder difficulties, this still isn't really the big thing that makes the game hard. It's just kind of a small thing. So I wouldn't care too much about these interests unless you're trying to get that sort of that holy trio for an astronaut of suit wearing, supplying, and researching. You get all three of those, and the guy can become an astronaut for really low morale requirements. But keep that in mind. Let's also talk a little bit about the stress reactions and reroll till I get 3 different ones. Now again, these stress reactions are tied to these duplicants, so every Devon is going to look like this, and they're going to be a binge eater. Every Camille is going to look like this, and they're going to be a vomiter, and so on and so forth. Generally speaking, the worst stress reaction is binge eater because it destroys resources of yours more or less, right? And food is one of the important things. You could really, if you have a base full of binge eaters and you let your stress problems go, you can really do a number on your food supply. Better ones are things like vomiter or ugly crier. Let's see if we can reroll and get ourselves an ugly crier. Yeah, ugly criers will generate sort of a decor debuff around them, but that's not really that big of a deal. Vomiters will produce polluted water. Ugly criers will produce clean water, right, or non-polluted water. And the destructive guys have this kind of interesting, they won't repair buildings while above 60% stress. So it's not just when they reach 100% stress that they destroy a building, right? They'll also not repair buildings above 60% stress, which is not really something that these other guys have as sort of a feature, but something to keep in mind if you're wondering why a guy isn't repairing something. He might be destructive in a kind of a high stress level. Destructive is not that bad though, because most of the time they don't destroy something important, and you can just repair it, right? Some guy will run along and repair the building that this guy just destroyed. And it doesn't really cost you much in the way of resources. These actually generate resources for you, though. So I would say crier and vomiter are better, right? These are the best stress reactions. Obviously, you probably just don't even want to stress your dupes out ever, so this might not be relevant ever, but these are the good ones. This one's okay, and then binge eater is probably the worst. Now onto the traits, and this is going to be a little bit tricky because there's no real good way to kind of select for the traits, but let's just sort of start with, let's just kind of go through and re-roll until we get new stuff. Night Owl. There's basically, if I recall, a 5-block period where they're going to gain +2, or is it +3? I think it's +3 to their attributes. This is kind of neat. You can give them a schedule in which they work during this time and kind of get more out of them. But +3 to attributes is not like that great, right? Because it's a very limited amount of time as well that we're talking about. We're talking about like a short window of maybe like 5 blocks, right? With 24 blocks in a day. Not the biggest of deals. You also, I guess, kind of need, this isn't a big cost to like kind of put them on a schedule where they make use of Night Owl, where they're not sleeping during the Night Owl bonus. But I guess the main thing is just like a +3 in attributes is usually not that important, right? Like it's nice, don't get me wrong, but it's not going to be a game-changing thing when it occurs for just a small period of the day. It's a positive. I'd take it. I mean, it's good. It's one of the better ones, but it's not anything crazy good. Allergies. Some people will say this is the worst one of all because duplicants exposed to pollens, the sort of the floral scent germs, get a massive, I mean a really, really big stress debuff from that. And you basically need to make medicines for them, otherwise they're gonna, whatever their stress reaction is, they're gonna have it. So maybe this is a good thing. Maybe this is actually a positive thing. You combine it with like an ugly crier, and this person just generates water for you all day. But if you want to be kind of kind to your duplicants, it's a little bit harder to do it with duplicants that have allergies. It really restricts a lot of things that you can do. You basically don't want to grow bristleberries, and you want to very carefully manage exposure to Buddy Bud, I believe it is. Those are the things that are going to generate the floral scents. I don't know. Like, some people say this is the worst, though, but I think that's a manageable thing. I don't particularly like bristleberries as a food source, so I think giving them up is not that big of a deal. And not planting Buddy Bud in your base is not that hard. Some people, though, will either really want to use bristleberries, or they'll try and use these floral scents as a sort of germ combating strategy. And also, there are just some other benefits to using the floral scents. So some people will really try and avoid allergies. I don't mind it that much. I, in fact, saw a base where the guy challenged himself to take an all allergic base and then plant tons of bristleberries and have Buddy Buds everywhere, and that was pretty interesting. But it is a very massive stress debuff. Like, this is ultra hard mode for stress if you're just letting these guys get exposed to these to the allergens, right? So this can be pretty bad, or it can be absolutely non-impactful. Depends on how you're running your base and everything like that. Iron Gut. This is pretty useless. This is maybe one of the most useless positive traits. Food poisoning is really not going to be that big of a deal if you're running your base correctly. Yeah, I mean, you don't get food poisoning in your food supply to begin with, and then none of this is really an issue. Squeamish is also one of the best ones of these negative traits because it's absolutely unimportant. They can't tend to the sick. That's fine. Again, kind of like with Iron Gut, you don't expect people to get sick from these things because you make sure you have a latrine and you have people washing their hands, and food poisoning isn't an issue. But yeah, Iron Gut, not really worthwhile. Squeamish, a good one because it kind of like Iron Gut, it basically doesn't do anything. That's going to be a common thing. Negative traits that don't have an impact on your duplicant are great. Positive traits that don't have an impact on your duplicant are terrible, and that's going to be the general thing. So Iron Gut, bad. Squeamish, good. Buff. This guy just gets a +3 to strength. Strength is one of the best attributes. So it's just good, right? Buff is one of the better things. This guy's already getting nails. I think this might be a girl. But yeah, nails. They say they're huge wimps, but this guy's got +3 to strength and another +3 to strength. That's pretty good. So if you just want extra stats, this is fine. Allergies we already covered. I think Buff is one of the better ones. Germ Resistant. Okay, this one's really interesting. Germ Resistance is practically useless in a base that isn't like playing on hard mode when it comes to germs, right? Because you're going to be following like some germ protection protocols. You're going to make sure your guys aren't just swimming in slime lung and food poisoning and so on and so forth. And then, this isn't really that important because they're not getting that many diseases anyways. But at higher difficulties, it's going to be a lot trickier. The reverse of this Biohazardous is going to be sometimes a real base killer on bases that are set at this really high difficulty setting, because you just get major decreases to your germ resistance sort of naturally, and getting just any little bit of germ resistance out of a duplicant is going to be a good thing, because otherwise you're just going to be plagued by disease. So this is like really important if you're playing in that hard mode setting, and really unimportant otherwise, because there's just this like threshold basically where either this matters or it doesn't. Mouthbreather is arguably the worst of all the negative traits. Mouthbreather doubles the air consumption rate of a duplicant, right? So instead of consuming 100 grams per second, they consume 200 grams per second. Oxygen is going to be something that is going to tax your water supply and your algae supply and a lot of stuff, and is really one of the most important or most difficult things to supply to your duplicant. There are ways to generate food for free. There are ways to manage your heat more or less for free. But there isn't really a way of generating oxygen for free, except for maybe some stuff with like oxyferns and whatnot. So especially in the early game, when you're kind of just trying to go slow and you don't really want to have to open up a lot of stuff to make your new oxygen, Mouthbreather can be really bad. In the late game, you don't mind it that much because you're probably going to have figured out a way to get a ton of water and therefore a ton of oxygen through electrolysis. But for most of the early and mid game, Mouthbreather is probably the worst trait, and just by a wide margin. This is one of the worst things that can happen to you as a duplicant. I just avoid picking any Mouthbreathers pretty much automatically. They're really bad. Mole Hands. This is just like Buff, +3 to a stat, or +3 to an attribute. In this case, it's Excavation. Perfectly fine. Yokel can't do researching errands. Well, as long as this isn't your researcher, as long as this isn't the guy that's doing your learning jobs. This doesn't give a -3 to science. It just says they can't do the researching, so that's perfectly fine. Any of these can't do a job things, like Squeamish over here, that's perfectly fine. Squeamish is probably the best of all these traits because who cares, right? Like, can't do doctoring errands, whatever. So Mole Hands, pretty good. To the extent that you care about bonus attributes. Digging is one of the less important ones. Buff is like a better one. Yokel's pretty good though, because you don't care about this. Like unless this guy is your +7. Like Yokel on this duplicant would be backbreaking because this is the person supposed to be doing your research, but Yokel on this duplicant doesn't do anything. Perfectly fine. Anemic, decreased athletics. Yeah, this is definitely something to avoid. This is a -5 to athletics. They move half as fast as everyone else. Half as fast as anyone else who doesn't have any bonuses, right? The guy with a +10 athletics is going to be running circles around Max here. Anemic is one of the worst of all the negative traits. Like up there with, I mean, probably worse than Mouthbreather if we really want to think about things. Because Mouthbreather, I can make more oxygen. Making this guy run faster is going to take a long time. Eventually, he will kind of grow out of it. His athletics will slowly climb up, and he'll reach sort of a normal state. But man, it'd be miserable to play with this guy in the meantime. Interior Decorator. This is almost a negative trait. Increases their creativity, which again, as I discussed before, pretty bad as an attribute, and decreases their decor morale bonus. Luckily, this decrease isn't that big. -5 to their decor morale is not that big of a deal. When you're talking about sometimes running your duplicants to areas where they have like a -200 decor, -5 is not huge. And another thing to consider is that the decor penalty to your morale caps out at -1 on sort of the negative side of things. So it's never going to get worse than that. And for a large period of the game, your guys are going to be at -1 morale from decor. So you're because you're not going to try anything with decor. So I don't think this is that bad. This is not good though, right? Creativity is pretty useless, and the fact that it has a negative to it, as what is supposed to be a positive trait, pretty bad. So max here, pretty useless. No taste. Increased food morale bonus. Kind of by the same token that it wasn't really that important that we lost the decor from having an interior decorator. It isn't that important that we have a +1 food morale bonus. Like, it's nice, but it's not game changing. Frankie here is just going to be a happier dude in general. That's fine. We're going to feed him garbage, and he's going to think it's great. We're going to feed him mid-tier foods. He's going to think they're top-tier foods. The guy just, loves eating. He's fine with everything. In this case, can't tell the difference between stuffed berry and cardboard. Yeah, sure. So, okay. Just don't feed him stuffed berry. Perfectly fine. I think this is a fine trait. Yeah, yokel we've already done. Germ Resistant, we've basically already done. Again, this is important in some cases. There's a flip side of this, the Biohazardous, which is just the reverse of this. Again, that one, how bad that is depends upon what difficulty setting you're playing on. Really high difficulty setting for your germs, this is really important, otherwise not. Narcoleptic, some people really avoid this because sometimes narcolepsy can have your duplicants fall asleep in really dangerous areas. You just kind of send them in there really quick just to do one thing, and then they fall asleep, and then suddenly they're dead. Because they fall asleep in a really dangerous area. I don't think this is that bad though. I think the main problem with it is that you just occasionally get these sore back debuffs and little things like that, which can slow down your duplicant. I don't want to take this because it does really increase the chance of this duplicant dying, but also just because it effectively, in a lot of cases, acts as an athletics malice, a weird one. Sometimes a very if they have a narcoleptic nap right before they end up falling asleep anyways, it's not a big deal. In any case, just not a great one, not a terrible one. This is 3.6 Runkin. I don't want this one, but I'm not horrified by narcoleptic either, even though some people kind of are and avoid them a lot. Caregiver, yeah, this is useless. I don't care about medicine, so this is bad. Narcoleptic we already talked about. Gourmet. Yeah, Gourmet is kind of like the interior decorator. We improve a skill that we don't care about. Oh, look, plus 15% to my cooking speed. That's pretty useless, right? Plus 5% per point, when literally they're giving me plus 40% per point for my science and a bunch of extra stuff on top of it. But then here they also get a -1 to their food morale bonus. This is basically the reverse of no taste, right? They want this person, if you want to max out their food bonus, you're going to have to give them the frost burgers, which is kind of crazy. Mouthbreather we talked about, one of the worst ones. And there are more. Diver's Lungs. This is one of the best ones, right? Diver's Lungs cuts the air consumption rate in half. So instead of consuming 100 grams per second of oxygen, they only consume 50 grams per second of oxygen. If I recall, they still exhale 2 grams per second of carbon dioxide pretty constantly, but this is just straight up good for the same reasons that Mouthbreather was bad. It does take you kind of 2 Diver's Lungs duplicants to counteract 1 Mouthbreather, so this is not as good as Mouthbreather was bad in that sense. But still, this is pretty good because, again, oxygen is just one of those things you can't get for free. It costs you resources. This person just costs you resources less over time, which is great. Iron Gut, Yokel, don't care. Early Bird, much like, what was it? The Night Owl. The Early Bird kind of has the same thing going on. It's +2 bonus to all attributes, but it's 5 schedule blocks, and they're kind of at a time that is more typical for players to have their duplicants up and about. Again, this is not hard because you can change their schedules around really easily. Duplicants don't really care what time of day it is. They don't have like some, right? They're underground. They don't care. So it's really only like better than Night Owl in the sense that pretty much only in the sense that it's easier to have like a set schedule for everybody, I guess. I don't know. It's not that big of a deal. Either way, it's still kind of like Night Owl, just good. Probably not as good as Night Owl, but still good, right? I think actually the trick is that this one is +2 bonus to all attributes for 5 schedule blocks, and Night Owl is only for 3 schedule blocks, literally during the short period that they count as nighttime. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that's it. So this one, pretty comparable to Night Owl in either case. Narcoleptic we already discussed. Gourmet, Squeamish, Pacifist, this one's fine. Can't do attacking errands. Yeah, well, very rarely are my duplicants ever going to be attacking anything. And it's actually kind of good that they're pacifists, because a lot of the things one of the weird things that happens in the game is kind of a bug, but when you designate something to be attacked, every single duplicant, no matter whether or not some other duplicant is already set to go and do it, will run off to attack that guy. Like, it'll become a job that is listed for everybody, no matter if someone else picks it up. So you can sometimes have like all of your duplicants be doing kind of like priority 4 things, and then you set something to be attacked, and it's only 20 duplicants rush at this guy to go and kill him. Relevant, I guess, if you're fighting a bunch of poke shells, but for most cases where you're attacking something, this is like a positive thing, right? You don't want everybody just, running at this person. You only need like one guy to go and kill it. This helps you in that regard. So Pacifist, no big deal. This is actually kind of positive. Anemic, bad. Grease Monkey, again, +3 to an attribute. In this case, Machinery, pretty bad, but still, better than a lot of the other things you can get. Small Bladder. All right, so Small Bladder is actually a positive thing in a lot of circumstances. It does require your duplicant to kind of like go to the bathroom more often, which can be a little bit problematic. You might want to put them on a special schedule so they get downtime, or just they'll take an emergency break when they're working, right? They won't just pee their pants. They will go and run off to a bathroom, which can work, can not work. One of the interesting things is that every time a duplicant uses the bathroom, they generate water for you, right? They generate 6.7 kilograms of water. So if a duplicant uses the bathroom, say, twice as often a day, they're generating more resources than the normal. So this kind of combined with Diver's Lungs really minimizes the amount of net resources it takes to keep a duplicant running, right? Because lavatories will generate more water than they consume on use. All the same, the fact that they end up running back and forth more kind of counteracts, like they become a little bit less useful of a duplicant as a result. They spend more of their time running back and forth because they need to go to the bathroom. There are definitely circumstances where that doesn't matter, where you keep this guy close to a bathroom at all time. This guy's working as like a cook, an artist, or something. Like, he has a set station near the bathroom, which is fine. It's easy to really negate the downside of this, and the upside is there that they generate more resources for you. Some people really don't like this. I think it's actually a good thing. I count this as a net positive. I'm fine with Small Bladder on my guys. Mole Hands, +3 to digging. I'm not sure if I mentioned that. Let me briefly mention all the other positive traits, and then we can kind of quit the re-rolling. Twinkletoes is another one. This is +3 to athletics. Pretty easy, right? It looks a lot like what these look like. You just get a +3 to your excavation in this case. Twinkletoes, you get +3 to your athletics. Quick Learner, I think I already discussed. +3 to learning is absolutely fantastic. And Uncultured is one of them. They basically have the reverse of the interior decorator. They get a -20 decor expectation. So they basically perceive everything as +20 on their decor, which is going to help them. Morale isn't that big of a deal, so again, it's not that huge, but that helps. And then for the negative traits that we haven't rolled yet, Noodle Arms gives your duplicants -3 strength. I don't think we've gone over that one. That's a big hit to your carrying capacity. They only carry 80 kilograms now, right? Anemic was the other kind of big one, which was -5 to athletics. They run at half speed, pretty bad. Slow learner, also really bad. They get -3 to learning. Again, like -3 to science is just really bad. You don't want that. Gastrophobia prevents them from cooking, no big deal. Tryptophobia prevents them from digging. That's a little bit more of a big deal, right? Not being able to do attacking, not being able to do doctoring, that's not a big of a deal. Not being able to dig means that duplicants can kind of get themselves into situations that are hard for them to get out of. Like they find themselves in some area without oxygen and they can't just dig their way out to a place with oxygen. Some people avoid tryptophobia like the plague. I think it's okay. It's definitely not one of the better negative traits to get, but it's fine. Like you can work around it. Unconstructive is also pretty high up there for a lot of people. They can't build. So by the same token, right, you get an unconstructive guy and they just can't build their way out of some bad situation, right? They need to build a ladder up to get out of some areas so they can reach oxygen, but they can't do it because they can't build. Kind of like with narcoleptic, like I think even more so than narcoleptic, tryptophobia and unconstructive just really run the risk of getting your duplicant killed due to some accident where they screw up, right, and they end up on a place where they shouldn't be. The absolute worst is like you experience one of those bugs where a duplicant is kind of digging out something and then a tile moves underneath them and they end up teleporting into an area that you haven't broken into. And then if they have tryptophobia, they can't dig themselves out. There's some really wacky things that can happen where a guy with tryptophobia can't survive. They just get themselves killed right at the start. So I try and avoid tryptophobia as well as unconstructive, just because I just don't want duplicants dying for stupid reasons. Irritable bowel is another one. They spend a little bit more time going to the bathroom. Not that big of a deal. Duplicants don't spend a whole bunch of time on the bathroom anyways, so an extra 50%, or basically doubling the time that they spend on the bathroom isn't the biggest of deals. You can just give these guys like an extra morale block and they're fine. I don't know. It's not the best one because you just imagine like you're giving these guys out of the 24 blocks in a day, one of them is just reserved to spending, that extra time on the bathroom. But it's not quite one block. You can kind of get away with not providing them a whole extra block of downtime, so it's not that bad. I still kind of avoid it. Biohazardous, I think we just discussed, kind of like with the Germ Resistant, we didn't roll it, but same idea, right? If you're playing on hard difficulty settings for disease, then it's pretty bad. It's almost killing you, but if you're playing on just normal difficulty settings, it's perfectly fine. Bottomless Stomach is, along with Mouthbreather, one of the worst ones. You need an extra 500 kilocalories a day. Duplicants normally eat 1,000. This is especially bad if you're already playing on the hard hunger difficulty settings, where you run out of food really super fast at the beginning. Having duplicants that also are basically, a bottomless pit of food is pretty bad. It's not proportionally as bad because it isn't a 50% increase in their food. So it isn't like they're consuming, before they might be consuming like 3,000 on kilocalories per day on the hard difficulty, and now they consume 4,500, and they'll still only consume 3,500, but it's still pretty bad. Food is a resource that you have a kind of limited supply of, particularly at the start, and it can really be a bit of an issue. Next up is Loud Sleeper. Man, there were a lot of negative traits we didn't roll. Loud Sleeper is, in the way that I play the game, completely irrelevant because I have all my duplicants basically on staggered schedules. So no two duplicants are basically sleeping at the same time, or even if they are, they're probably on completely different beds, are not next to each other. So Loud Sleeper basically means your duplicate will snore at night and wake up people in the beds immediately adjacent to them. So you build your beds just kind of all in a row. The Loud Sleeper will wake up the people right next to them. If they're in a comfy bed, they won't wake up people next to them. So once you upgrade your bed tier, sort of, then you don't have to worry about that. But at the beginning, you really just want to have them on a different schedule. So one duplicate is sleeping while the others are working, and then another one goes to sleep and everyone else is working, and people just kind of rotate like that. And then your Loud Sleeper is never waking anybody up because he's not sleeping at the same time as anybody else. I think Loud Sleeper is perfectly fine, but if you don't do that, if you like having your duplicates all on the same schedule, it is a little bit annoying to kind of have to build a guy's bed and not have the beds right next to him. You should give him kind of two tiles on either side. That might just, wreak a little bit of havoc on the way that you space things, or particularly in the way that you manage sort of the aesthetics of your base. It just doesn't look pretty. For people who like that, who have all the duplicants waking up at the same time and want to keep nice, pretty rows of beds, that's annoying, but otherwise it's not that big of a deal. And finally, the big controversial one is Flatulent. on average, a flatulent duplicant will produce 4 grams per second of natural gas. And this doesn't seem like a bad idea. Like, you look at small bladder, and I said small bladder, right, was perfectly fine because, look, they're generating more resources for you. Every time they pee, they're generating a little bit more water for you. This isn't that bad, right? Like, it's got some upside. Flatulent, even though there is that upside of you're getting some natural gas for free, and presumably you could use that to try and power your base, especially when you only have like one flatulent dupe, it's so much more annoyance than it's worth. Because the way that the game works is that you can only have one type of gas in a tile at a time. So it doesn't matter if this guy only farts 100 grams of gas. The problem that you run into is that little packet of gas is going to just bounce around and travel everywhere. And the really unfortunate thing about it is that it is small enough that it will turn off the growth of plants, right? Plants require a minimum of 150 grams of atmosphere in order to grow. And so a lot of plants, if this little packet of fart crosses by their way, the plant will stop growing, right? And it might take you a while for this natural gas to kind of settle in an area where your plants aren't, because it isn't the heaviest of gases. It floats above both chlorine and carbon dioxide, I believe. So it's kind of like, it's going to be right on that border between where you have the carbon dioxide and the oxygen in your base, and that can be the point where you also have a bunch of plants. So it's really interesting. And if you had a base that it was all flatulent duplicants, then maybe there were some interesting things you could do, because you'd have an appreciable amount of natural gas. And right, like it'd be a little bit less of a problem because one, those packets would, like, there'd be more of them and they'd merge together, right? So you wouldn't have this problem with air pressure stopping your plants from growing, even though there's plenty of air around them. It's just that one little fart that they're contained in right now. But also you would actually get more out of a system that then tried to harvest that natural gas from the air, right? Have an air filtration system would actually be able to power itself, because your duplicants would be producing enough. But it's so small, right? It's 4 grams per second on average. They have basically a chance of producing a 100 gram fart every 10 to 40 seconds, right? It's just so small that it isn't really a good resource, and it disrupts so much stuff, right? You're trying to set up airlocks, you're trying to vacuum out an area, you're trying to do this or that, and then suddenly you need exosuits and all this stuff to make it work. And I think I would either play an all flatulent base and enjoy that challenge, or I'd play a no flatulent base. Like, if I don't plan on taking flatulent duplicants, I avoid all of them, because otherwise it is just the most annoying thing in the world to deal with. And I don't I don't want to do that. There's no easy answer to the farting duplicants, or at least no good answers unless all of them are farting. So it's an either all or sort of thing. Anyways, so that's all of the negative traits, all of the positive traits, all of the interests, all of the attributes. That's sort of my complete guide. What would I actually look for? What would be sort of the top things that I would be going for? I think I would always want to have some sort of researcher. And if that researcher had quick learning, right, that would be even better. So if I said, look, I want a researcher, I might reroll until I get quick learner as a trait. That way I get that crazy plus 10 to science. Absolutely insane. They also would need to only have that one interest, so it might take a little while to reach this, especially if I do what I usually do, which is I get it, but then I click through it anyways. But here we go. Well, not quite. In any case, you'd click around until you got quick learner plus the plus 7 to science, and then you would be just completely sitting pretty. That's like the super easy mode, like this guy. Allergies, I'm fine with. I'd probably deal with this. I just wouldn't have an exposed to floral scents. I wouldn't, do bristle blossoms and whatnot on my base. Again, I'm kind of fine with this. It's a lot of people really avoid this because the stress debuff is really huge. But boom, plus 10 science. This guy's my researcher. He's also going to become a super dupe later on. I might literally just make another guy like this because learning is just such a good stat. And then for the other guy, strength is fine, right? Or if we just went to like random. For the people who aren't the scientists, people with diver's lungs with some interesting traits would be nice. But also just people with good athletics, good strength would be pretty useful. Good digging early on is also pretty good. If I was planning on basically accepting a duplicant every 3 cycles, I might also take a farmer early on. That way I can grow the number of seeds that I have and expand my farms to match the number of people that I'm bringing into the base. But yeah, the big gains to science. Avoid the really worst stuff like flatulent. quick learner and these really positive traits are really big. I'd even take them on the guy who's doing a lot of digging. And you can use these sort of reroll options up here to help you with that, to get those a little bit quicker. This is a new feature that they've added to the game. Really positive. I really like it. And that's it. This is an episode that's gone on for an hour, super long, but I've discussed basically everything you need to know about how all these attributes work, all these interests work, all these traits work, which ones are good, which ones are bad, the stress reactions, and of course the most important fact of all, there are 35 unique duplicants, and you cannot roll a Meep or a Liam the entire time, no matter how much you try. So yeah, that's it for this episode, and if they update anything or change anything, I will try to include that down in the description so you know if this is an up-to-date guide to the game. So if you're watching this a year from now, check the description, and it ought to give you any extra information that hasn't been included here. And that's it for this episode, and I will catch you guys next time.